genre.
And that is our mid-season finale. We've got a lot to talk about, but first some housekeeping. The show is currently on a brief hiatus while we work to complete the final batch of episodes. While your feed may be on hiatus, we certainly are not, and we plan to release the final episodes on a regular schedule beginning in the spring 21. We cannot wait for you to hear these final episodes. In the meantime, there's plenty of great new content being released by Dueling Genre Productions. The best place to get this content is in our Patreon exclusive feed, where for only $5 a month, you can get access to our archive of shows, as well as our Patreon exclusive podcast episodes, including our new upcoming weekly shows, Dueling Genre Versus and Dueling Genre Tonight. So, needless to say, there's plenty to listen to while we wait a few weeks for the rest of the season. It's also a great time to re-listen to the entire show. But for now, we're about to go beyond Geek by Night, The Long Con. I am the Irish neighbor, Matt Bennett. And I'm joined today by my great panel. As always, writer and creator Scott Carelli.
Hi.
Writer and executive producer Nick Jimenez.
Hello.
And director of The Long Con, as well as casting director and co-executive producer Chelsi Kern.
Hello.
In this episode, The Long Con, we see Simon confront his father, David, who has just announced his new hyper-realistic video game, The Game, with a very familiar title. During the confrontation, Simon expounds upon how pressuring and absent his father was, only to read his mind and find out that David is not his father at all. Elsewhere at the convention, the Swifts and the Overachievers run into William and Nathan. Thanks to Lorelai reaching out to Victor, the underdogs also arrive. Nathan uses his powers, with Billy's amplification, to put a barrier around himself, and to get the convention goers to turn on everyone. Meanwhile, David reveals that he is not Simon's father. Simon is his clone. David tries to justify his decision, but Simon leaves, disgusted. After confessing to killing Henry, William instructs Nathan to use his powers to destroy Underdog Comics. Mindy transports everyone to the comic shop in hopes of stopping the bomb, but they're too late. As they all watch on, the bomb goes off. Underdog Comics is no more. Elsewhere, the Ire watches the day's events unfold on the evening news and swears that he will get revenge on the underdogs.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Awesome episode.
All right, well, we will see you guys in the spring.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Just wanted to remind you that that's what happened.
So, Chelsi, I'm going to start with you because this is your second episode that you've directed, and the second one this season. This is a very big episode with a lot of revelations and a lot of characters in it. So, what was the hardest scene for you to direct in this episode?
The hardest scene was probably the ending, with all the high stakes, the bomb's about to go off. I have to find takes from everybody where everybody's at like the same level of intensity and like same level as panic. Otherwise, it just sounds different and weird if like one person is way up here and another person is kind of down here. Like finding the right level and tone in the scene was a little difficult, but ultimately I made it work, and it was intense, but it was fun.
Yeah. What was the most fun scene to direct?
I don't know if I would call them fun, but I would say my two favorite scenes were the one between David and Simon, where Simon kind of has his whole speech to his dad about how he was growing up. And then also the scene where Lorelai finds out about William killing Henry. Both of those scenes were really intense and heartfelt, and I got really emotional directing both of them. And yeah, so they weren't fun per se, but they were definitely my favorite to direct. I think that it was, they were pairings that I really wanted to see and really wanted to hear. And so being able to have them in the same room together was just very exciting. And the actors playing all four of them just knocked it out of the park and made it really easy to get the emotional tone I was looking for in the scene.
What's different about directing those emotional scenes? Like, particularly, I'm thinking about Lorelai finally confronting William, which is something that we've really been leading up to for many episodes now. There was a very brief interaction in Friends and Enemies, but they haven't been in the same room since, except for in flashbacks.
Right.
So what is it like? Is your process different at all when you're directing an episode that's more dialogue heavy and character driven?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm focused less on like the quick, witty pacing that I'm used to in most of the scenes. It's usually much more fast paced, much more snappy. But these scenes, we get an opportunity to kind of slow down a little bit in a way that we're not really used to in most of our episodes. It's very different. Getting an opportunity to slow things down and really feel the emotional impact that these characters are experiencing is really powerful. And truthfully, I think out of everybody gave incredibly solid performances, but I was really blown away by Nick with William, because it's the first time that we've ever heard William get emotional. William is always very strong and stoic, and he kind of breaks a little bit at one point with this conversation with Lorelai, and that was really, really amazing to hear, and thus really great to direct. It made my job in some ways way easier and in some ways way harder, because I just had so many great options to choose from. But ultimately what I went with was a much more kind of breaking of William that we see momentarily. But, he goes right back to his normal self. But it was just really interesting to me to hear that and to see that difference in William.
Yeah. Same topic to you, Scott and Nick. So there's a couple scenes in this episode that have a lot of heavy lifting emotionally and plot wise. Like that confrontation, the two big confrontations are part of that. Are those scenes easier to write because they're story beats and they've been in your head for a while? Or are they tougher because there is that heavy lifting and they do have to, there's these big reveal moments?
I think from a writing standpoint, the scenes that are, for me personally, the emotional scenes between Simon and David or William and Lorelai, those were just pure pleasure for me to write, because it was just really cool getting to finally get into these characters emotionally, and both parties aren't holding back in either of those scenes. So those were just really fun. The scenes that were just dead challenging to write are, I think, those scenes where everyone's in the room and we have to move the ball and the ball has to get past a certain people, and you got to make sure that every character, I think those were the more difficult scenes for me to write.
I think Nick's right. I mean, with those big ensemble scenes, there's not going to be a lot of personal connection to what you're writing there, because you really are just trying to sort of, in a way, solve a problem, which is that, X information needs to be shared to the audience through these characters. And how are we going to do that? And who's going to say what? And how are we going to reveal that? But that's, there's not a lot of personal connection to that. It's more just like finding the characters' voices and how certain characters would say certain things. With the emotional stuff, I always try to come to those scenes, and I always try to push the other writers to come to those scenes from a personal place, to find that personal thing that you can write through that character, and so, for me, I have a complicated relationship with my father, and so there's a lot of that in that sequence from me. And then the scene where all of the underdogs are trying to figure out what to do, which is one that we haven't really brought up yet. And I think, it is a big ensemble scene, but to me, that was the scene that actually made me cry while I was writing it, because it was me saying goodbye to the show. They're all saying goodbye to the shop, but to me, the shop is the show. And so what I was writing in that sequence was myself saying goodbye to the show and how much it means to me, because I know that when I destroy this shop, there's no going back. The show is ending. And so that was a big moment for me. That was the scene that I'm not usually the type of writer who cries at their own writing. But I was sort of, that scene was just dragging me to a really emotional place of how much this show is meant to me. And being able to write that in those characters' voices. And I don't know. It was easy. It was easier to write than a lot of the more complicated stuff because it comes from that more emotional place. Definitely emotionally hard, but absolutely easier to write and more, I wouldn't say pleasurable, but it's satisfying, I suppose. And so, that whole final sequence was of this episode was one of my favorite things I've ever written for the show. And it's because it was coming from a personal place of me saying goodbye to the show. And it's not the last time that I'm going to say goodbye to the show, but it was sort of the first time that I was saying goodbye to the show. There's multiple times in the back half of the season where, we're sort of saying goodbye again. And it just sort of gets more permanent each time. But this was the first time that I was kind of dealing with the fact that this show that's been a part of my life for so long is ending, presumably forever. And so it's been, that was definitely the most rewarding part of this episode for me, writing this episode.
Yeah. How long did you know that you were going to have to destroy Underdog Comics and raise the stakes like this?
When we were breaking this episode. We didn't know that was going to be a thing we were going to do. I think we were sort of talking through how are we going to end this episode? How are we going to earn the idea of a mid-season finale? How are we going to show people where the stakes are? And I think early on in the discussion, we kind of joked about destroying the shop. We're like, oh, we could just blow up the shop. And then we're like, yeah, that would be that's funny. And then the more we talked about it, I think we were all like, are we going to blow up the is that what we're doing? Are we blowing up the shop?
I have a pretty vivid memory of, we've fallen into this really cool system this season where Scott and Cassandra will have the super great conversation, and then Scott will sit me down and I just get to hear they just get to reap the rewards. And Scott just pitched me the episode that ended with blowing up the shop. And I just remember getting so giddy, just really excited. And just cause I had a feeling of I'm kind of sadistic. I had a feeling of how it was going to impact the characters, but feeling we have to do this. This is such a moment.
Line in the sand.
And it's going to draw such cool things from the characters. And it just felt so right in the way that, difficult decisions, for your characters is sometimes the right thing to do. You want to challenge them. And this is just thrusts them out of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the back half of this episode is going to be.
At the end of this episode, all of our characters are kind of on one side or the other. Even people that used to oppose each other have sort of fallen into these battle lines. Is this something that's a result of getting leading up to the finale? And do you feel like it's kind of a straight shot from here to the finale, or are there some bumps in the road or surprises between here and there?
I mean, both. It's definitely, I mean, we were talking about it, I think, before we sort of broke for the holidays. We were talking about what these last 4 episodes are going to look like. The final episodes. We're actually not sure if it's 4 anymore or not. But we were talking about it and we were like, is everybody just going to be wearing the same clothes all the way to the end of the show? And we were like, I think they might be actually, because every episode in our minds right now, every episode seems to be leading into the next directly. And there's not a lot of like downtime.
Nobody's going to get coffee anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Those days are over. The rest of the show really feels like, we've made this comparison before, but I think that the rest of the show really feels like the Serenity to the rest of the show's Firefly. In terms of like, yeah, now we've got one big last adventure that everyone's going on. And I mean, each episode has a distinct personality, and a distinct plot, but each of those things lead directly into the next thing in such a way that it still feels like one story.
Yeah. Even starting with New Normal, going all the way here, and the whole show, the characters have always had a habit of compartmentalizing and using problems to avoid other problems. They always had something else to run away to or from. They always had a choice. And Billy, I think like any solid villain tries to do, calls them out and challenges them on this. And now we get to see who they are. Like there is no more distractions. They have to, they have to deal with the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really exciting to finally have the characters like firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when I came up with the title for this show, it was always obviously it's like a take on like a mild-mannered reporter by day, hero at night, but Geek by Night as a title, those 3 words haven't really made a lot of sense. In terms of like, well, they're not just geeks at night, they're geeks during the day, and also they're barely superheroes. And I think for the first time in the show's history, the back half of this series is going to sort of earn the title because now they're geeks on the down low because they can only be superheroes. There's nothing else left for them but to be superheroes. And so like, it's interesting to me that for the first time in the show's history, we've actually earned the title. And the title makes sense in a way more so than it ever has before.
That's awesome. So one thing that I love to do for episodes recently is I'd like to go around the room and ask for shout outs for somebody else's contribution to the episode, especially these big ones where we kind of get a little piece of everybody. So Chelsi, I thought I'd start with you as the director of the episode. Is there anybody on the cast or crew that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah. A couple people. Can I cheat and do
Yeah, go for it. A lot of people work on the show.
Well, the 4 that I mentioned earlier, Simon, David, William, and Lorelai, so Naomi, Nick, Brad, and Andrew just knocked it out of the park. I was blown away by their performances. They made my job so much easier and so much harder because they gave me so much to work with and gave me exactly what I wanted and needed. And they were rock stars, absolute rock stars. I was floored by their performance and for all different reasons. Like with Andrew, like Scott, I have a complicated relationship with my dad. And so it was a very intense scene for me to direct. And Andrew just like had so much heart, and Brad brought so much like charisma, but also this like kind of intimidating in some ways force. Like, he seems like this very casual Tom Hanksy kind of guy, but has occasional moments where you see like the real David, and it was really cool to see those little moments that Brad brought out. And with Naomi, she had this huge revelation about Henry, and her reaction to it is so pure and so heartfelt and angry, and just there's at one point that she like growls in one of her sentences, and it's just like it's so intense and so amazing. And then Nick just, oh my god, Nick. I told Nick when I was directing that he was doing an amazing job, and it was so fun to listen to him, because I was so blown away by the idea of Billy William being this person who breaks sometimes. We'd never seen that, and it was still so evil and so like scary and intense, and it was so cool. And then of course Mark Allen Jr. the Ire.
Mm-hmm.
That was so fun to bring him back, and he was hilarious in his takes, and it was a lot of fun to direct the Ire. So those are my shout outs.
Thank you, Chels.
Yeah, I think for my shout-outs, I want to give a shout-out to Paul and Natalie as Cosmo and Madison.
Yeah.
That scene with the two of them kind of like working together and solving this, like it felt like a very superhero moment where like the hero kind of realizes how competent they are. And it was just nice to have like that light scene of them, you know, fighting evil, you know, kind of doing what superheroes really do.
The Cosmopolitan.
The Cosmopolitan is such a great name. But yeah, it was just nice to have that moment in there and remind, you know, kind of what's at the core of the show.
Yeah. It's kind of like an even bigger like superhero move than like anything the most of the underdogs have had.
That's very true.
I love the overachievers. I want to, I don't know, like I want to just say, speaking of that scene, I kind of just want to give shout out to Scott of just like, I mean, that we keep talking about how complicated it is, and it is. I mean, like I remember it took him like, he would walk out of working on the scene just really spent because he was just giving it and just like doing the work. And I think when you listen to the work in both con episodes, those big set piece moments really sing. And I'm really proud of them. And I just think it's like really cool how it does kind of give you that feel of like you can picture it. It paints a picture. So yeah, shout out to Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want to shout out Chelsi because this is an episode that like if this was a normal show, like I probably should have directed it. Like it's so heavy, it's so many reveals, it's such a big mythology show, it's so important. And Chelsi had no idea going into it what she was in for when she got the script. And it was fun getting the text from her as she got deeper in the script and realizing what was going on and how big of an episode this was. But I knew that she could do it, and she did. Like, I mean, she knocked it out of the park. I think it's one of the best directed episodes of the show. And it's, I mean, it's like I directed it, which is, you know, a high compliment, for me because I'm such a perfectionist. So, yeah, I mean, you did an incredible job, and, I'm glad that I didn't direct it because it meant that you got to. And I think that you did amazing work on this. And I'm sure it was really stressful getting it just right. But you nailed it. So you should be proud.
Aww.
It's a really, really, really incredible episode, I think.
I'm going to cry. Thank you.
So I've got one more question, but before we get there, I wanted to see if anybody else has anything they'd like to add about the long con.
Another terrific score by Tofty.
Yes.
Yeah. I do want to give him some extra credit on this one too, because he always turns out a really great score. But as Nick pointed out, This episode was really hard on me from a sound design standpoint. It took a long time, longer than it should have. I was definitely ran past the due date on my cut of the episode, because it just took so long to figure out how to visualize isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Visualize these sounds and try and figure out how to make them all work and make the episode come together the way that I was envisioning it. Because writer Scott hates audio editing Scott and vice versa. So I was late turning this in, and Tofty had to score this from scratch in 3 days. And he will say that this is not his best work. And he's like, I don't think he's particularly thrilled with it, as much as he should be, because, I mean, he knocked it out of the park. He prioritized the scenes that were most important in terms of like stuff that needed its own, it's like a new score and original music. And he used the perfect, he laid in the perfect sort of, standards into the scenes where those belonged, and he repurposed a lot of stuff that worked. And I just want to give a shout out to him in terms of like working smarter, not harder, and that's not to say that he didn't work hard, but the fact that he got this done in 3 days is a testament to how smartly he works. And how immensely talented he is, because you're right, this score rules. And I hope that, as time goes, he'll be a lot more proud of it than maybe he was when he did it.
A thing I really liked about Tofty's soundtrack in this episode was that there were a lot of musical callbacks to the beginning of the show. We heard a lot of themes that we heard in the reboot episodes at the beginning of the series. So it was cool that like the writing is connecting to the beginning and we're starting to get like this full picture. But that musical language and those themes that we've come to hear many times, like used really effectively, especially during the convention presentation that David gave. It was just a cool feeling to kind of like feel like it's a callback and, it's building on that as well. So yeah, the soundtrack for this episode was very awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we wrap up here, this is the first Geek by Night installment of 2021. So what I'd like to do is ask everybody here, what is one thing you are looking forward to in 2021? Regardless of what it is.
Yeah, do you mean like in general? Or for...
Like for me, I think the thing I'm really excited for, besides like hopefully things opening up and like people getting vaccinated and things like that, is Kong versus Godzilla is something that I've been waiting for so long now. I'd say that's a solid number 2 on my list for 21. Just because as a diehard Godzilla fanatic, it feels like this movie's been a decade in the making. And now that HBO Max has bought the rights to it, I can watch it at home safely, and it's nice to have like movies to look forward to again. I feel like everything else was just kind of pushed out indefinitely, but after Wonder Woman came out, it makes me realize that we might start seeing some of these exciting pieces of art finally coming back out.
Yeah.
Don't look at me. Come back to me.
In the most positive way possible, I'm really looking forward to ending the show in the way that, like, I think that as a result of this hiatus, like, I don't know, like I miss it. I'm so looking forward to like seeing the great work that everyone's going to do, and like us coming together and just really ending this on a high note and ending this thing that I think we've all become really proud of and so attached to.
Yeah, I'm excited to find out what the ending is, because we've had an idea of what the ending is for a long time, and I'm sure that a lot of those goalposts will remain the same. But as you're going through, there's episodes this season that I didn't expect to be here. you know? And it's so it's just something that I'm really excited for as we are breaking it, because as of recording this, we're like going back into the writer's room tomorrow to get going on the last batch of episodes. And I should say the first one back is done. We're just sitting on it because we want to make sure that they all come out in a timely manner, rather than, you know, putting one out and then coming back in a few months with another one or something like that. We just want to make sure that they all come out in a row like these first 6 did. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm just really excited to see how we land the plane. And yeah, just what that looks like. I'm excited to get back in the writer's room tomorrow, and talk about, all of this. And other than that, you know, we have a lot of stuff in the future at Dueling Genre that we've been brewing for a while, for a few months now. And, that's all being announced later this month in January. And I'm really excited about that. Really, really excited about all of that. So yeah, I don't know. It's just I'm just excited. I'm like looking forward to a lot of stuff, in 2021, including, movies on HBO Max.
Like Dune.
Like Dune. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just really, I'm pumped. I don't know. I think we've got a lot of really cool stuff coming, and I'm just excited to share it with everybody and myself, to be honest.
Same.
Yeah, I definitely am looking forward to what comes next in the show. I have a lot of I don't want to say expectations. I don't have expectations, but I'm just really, really excited to see what happens next. And I think that what I wouldn't give to sit in on the writer's room. Like, the way their minds work is just amazing to me. And the things they come up with is just so, so cool. And so I'm really excited to see how they decide to end the show. And I also am looking forward to upcoming projects. And just getting to work with more voice actors. I think one of my favorite parts of my job is just meeting so many talented people from all over the world, and so I'm looking forward to meeting more people and building our network. And yeah,
the brand is strong.
The brand is strong. Okay, I want to say thank you again to my guests today, Scott, Nick, and Chelsi, for joining me, and thank you to all of you, the fans, the underdogs, for listening today. If you'd like to support the show, please join the Dueling Genre Patreon at duelinggenre.com/support. You'll also get access to classic Geek by Night episodes, scripts, and other behind-the-scenes materials, as well as bonus content from some of Dueling Genre's best shows. You can also tell your friends, families, and followers to subscribe to Geek by Night on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening to this right now. Finally, if you like our show, please leave a positive rating for us on iTunes. And don't fear, even though we have to wait a bit for the final episodes of Geek by Night, there will be plenty more Beyond Geek by Night discussion during the hiatus, after each new episode, and even beyond the series finale. Thanks for going Beyond Geek by Night with us. Have a super day.